My sister-in-law tried to trap me with a special cake at dinner. But when I shared it, her cruel secret shattered the family forever. Vanessa stood across from me, her smile stretched just a little too tight, her eyes watching me a little too closely. The crowded dining room hummed with laughter and conversation, but in that moment, all I could hear was the thumping of my own heartbeat. "Olivia, I made this just for you," she said, holding out a plate with a single slice of cake. A generous, perfectly cut piece, golden layers, smooth chocolate frosting, a delicate drizzle of caramel. It looked harmless. It looked thoughtful. But Vanessa had never been thoughtful toward me. Her words dripped with artificial warmth, her tone just a little too sweet, as if daring me to refuse. Around us, family members were engrossed in their own conversations, oblivious to the silent exchange happening between us. I felt it, a shift in the air, the way Vanessa's eyes never left my face. I hesitated, and in that moment of hesitation, I saw it, the flicker of something in her expression. Not anticipation, not pride in her baking, though it was something darker, something I couldn't name just yet. I smiled, careful to keep my voice light. "Wow, Vanessa, this looks amazing. You really went out of your way." Her lips twitched, almost as if she was suppressing a smirk. "Of course. I know how much you love chocolate. I didn't, and she knew that." For years, Vanessa had taken little jabs at me, her teasing never quite crossing the line into outright cruelty, but always just enough to leave me questioning whether it was intentional. At first, I had convinced myself it was just her personality. She was the kind of person who always found a way to poke fun at someone, claiming it was just a joke. But over time, I realized that with me, it was different. The way she would loudly point out when I gained a little weight after the holidays, the way she accidentally spilled wine on my new dress, the way she laughed a little too hard when she brought up embarrassing stories from my past in front of guests. And now, here she was, presenting me with a cake she had made just for me. I glanced at the plate again. Something wasn't right, but refusing it outright would cause a scene. Vanessa was an expert at playing the victim, and I wasn't about to give her another reason to paint me as ungrateful. So, I did the next best thing. I picked up my fork, sliced the cake in half, and smiled. "You know Mia loves chocolate cake. She should try some too." Vanessa's entire body stiffened. It happened in a fraction of a second, but I caught it, the way her fingers clenched around the serving knife, the way her smile wavered. "Oh no," she said quickly, her voice just a bit too high-pitched. "It's really rich. She might not like it." I turned to Mia, who sat on the other side of the table, her little legs swinging beneath her chair. "Do you want some, sweetheart?" Mia grinned. "Yeah." And before Vanessa could object, I placed half the slice on Mia's plate. Vanessa's face drained of color. I watched her closely, my stomach twisting with unease. She was a woman who rarely lost her composure, no matter what was happening. She always had a quip, a playful eye roll, a carefully controlled reaction. But not now. Now she sat frozen, her fork motionless in her hand, staring at Mia as if she had just made the worst mistake of her life. A thick silence settled between us. The sounds of clinking silverware and chatter filled the dining room, but at this table, it was as if the world had slowed down. Mia, oblivious to the tension, took a bite of the cake, and Vanessa's lips parted, as if she wanted to stop her. But it was too late. My pulse quickened. What was in the cake? Vanessa swallowed hard, finally snapping out of her daze. She forced a laugh, though it was shaky. "I hope you like it, sweetie," she said, her voice strained. Mia nodded, still chewing. "It's good." Vanessa barely reacted. Her focus was on me now, her eyes darting between the plate in front of me and the one in front of her daughter. I could see the wheels turning in her head, the frantic calculations. And then, as if realizing she had no choice, she picked up her own fork and took a slow, deliberate bite. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. The unease inside me grew. What had I just avoided? I didn't touch the cake. I couldn't, not after seeing her reaction. My fingers trembled slightly as I set my fork down, forcing myself to act natural. Vanessa had put something in that cake. I needed to know why, and more importantly, I needed to know what. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. Vanessa kept stealing glances at Mia, her face unnaturally pale. I could feel her watching me too, waiting, but for what? I didn't know yet. I barely touched my plate for the rest of the evening. My appetite had vanished, replaced by an unsettling weight in my chest. I kept my expression neutral, careful not to betray the storm of thoughts raging inside me. But I felt it, the cold sensation creeping up my spine, the nagging voice whispering in my mind. Something wasn't right. Across the table, Vanessa had barely spoken since Mia took that bite. She sat stiffly, her fingers curled around the stem of her wineglass, her smile long gone. Her eyes flicked to her daughter every few seconds, as if expecting something to happen. I should have confronted her right then and there. I should have demanded to know why she looked so horrified, why she suddenly seemed so fragile in her own skin. But I didn't, not yet. Instead, I watched. I let the moment stretch, absorbing every flicker of unease in her face, every forced laugh, every failed attempt to steer the conversation elsewhere. I wanted her to feel my gaze on her, to know that I had noticed, and she did. Vanessa refused to meet my eyes for the rest of dinner. When the evening finally ended, I made my way to the coat rack near the door, reaching for my jacket, when I heard the quiet rustle of footsteps behind me. "Olivia?" Her voice was different now, low, hesitant, not the usual overly confident tone she used whenever she spoke to me. I turned slowly, my fingers tightening around the fabric of my coat. Vanessa stood a few feet away, arms crossed, her expression carefully blank. "You didn't eat the cake," she said, her words measured. I raised a brow, tilting my head slightly. I wasn't that hungry. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You're overthinking this." "Overthinking?" A small, humorless laugh bubbled in my chest. That was Vanessa's favorite phrase whenever she wanted to dismiss something, whenever she wanted to make someone feel ridiculous for questioning her. It was a phrase I'd heard countless times before, in different situations. Always used to downplay her own actions. Like when she had accidentally spilled red wine on my dress at a family function and insisted I was overreacting. Like when she whispered backhanded compliments in my ear, her smile never faltering. Like when she once told my husband in front of everyone that she was surprised he had married me, because he always seemed like the type to go for someone more outgoing. Always the same game. But this time was different. This wasn't just a cruel comment or an embarrassing setup. This was something else, something that had made her panic. I took a slow step toward her, lowering my voice. Am I? Her fingers twitched against her elbow. For a brief second I saw it again, the flicker of fear in her expression. Then, just as quickly, she smoothed it over with a tight smile. I was just trying to do something nice for you, she said, and you turned it into something weird. Weird? I bit back the words I wanted to say, the accusations ready to spill from my tongue. Now wasn't the time, not yet. Instead, I just smiled. Right, must be my overactive imagination. Vanessa studied me for a moment longer before giving a small, forced laugh. You're impossible, she muttered, shaking her head as she turned away. I let her go because I knew one thing for certain. Vanessa was hiding something and I wasn't letting it go. The drive home was quiet. My husband Daniel was in a good mood, oblivious to the undercurrent of tension that had rippled through dinner. He talked about how nice it was to see everyone, how the family should get together more often. I hummed in response, staring out the window, my mind far away. I had spent years enduring Vanessa's subtle jabs, her carefully placed insults disguised as jokes. It had started so small that I had convinced myself it was nothing. The first time I noticed it, we had been at a Christmas gathering. I was wearing a simple green dress, one I had been excited about. Vanessa had smiled when she saw me, but instead of a compliment, she had leaned in and whispered, "That's such a bold choice. Not everyone can pull off a dress like that." I had laughed it off. It was just a comment. But then there were more. She had a way of making me second-guess myself, of making me feel like maybe I was the one who was being too sensitive. When I had gotten a promotion at work, she had smiled and said, "Wow, I wouldn't have expected you to be the corporate type. Good for you." When I brought homemade dessert to a family gathering, she had tasted it and said, "Oh, this is nice. Did you use a mix?" Every comment chipped away at me, and the worst part? No one else seemed to notice. To them, she was just playful, just teasing. But I knew because I saw the way her eyes flickered whenever she landed a remark, the way she watched for my reaction. She enjoyed it, and tonight had been no different, except this time she had gone further. This wasn't just a comment. This wasn't just a joke. This was something much, much darker. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter as the thoughts circled in my mind. "Hey," Daniel said beside me, glancing over. "You okay?" I forced a small smile. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded, not pushing the subject. And maybe that was my fault too. I had never told him everything. Not really. He knew that Vanessa and I didn't always get along, but he had never seen the full extent of it. He didn't know about all the small moments. The words she had slipped under her breath when no one else was listening. He didn't know how much I had learned to swallow over the years, but I wasn't swallowing this. Not this time. By the time we got home, the unease inside me had hardened into something else. Determination. I pulled the napkin-wrapped piece of cake from my purse and set it on the counter. It looked harmless under the kitchen light, just another slice of cake. But I wasn't imagining Vanessa's reaction. I wasn't overthinking. Something was wrong, and I was going to find out what. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the slice of cake still wrapped in the napkin. It sat on the counter, innocent in appearance but carrying a weight that sent a chill down my spine. The house was silent, save for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Daniel had gone to bed, completely unaware of the turmoil twisting inside me. I unwrapped the napkin slowly, revealing the soft layers of cake beneath. The frosting had smudged slightly, but it still looked as perfect as it had when Vanessa handed it to me. My fingers hovered over it, my stomach knotting with uncertainty. Was I being paranoid? Was this truly something sinister? Or had I finally let all of Vanessa's years of taunting warp my judgment? I reached for my phone, my fingers hesitating over the screen before I tapped the search bar and typed signs of food tampering. Lists of articles popped up, detailing methods, symptoms, and warning signs. Some of it was logical, strange textures, unusual smells, bitterness. But there were subtler things too, things I wouldn't have noticed unless I had been looking for them. I brought the cake closer, inhaling lightly. Nothing. No odd smells, no strange discoloration. But that didn't mean it was safe. My stomach twisted at the memory of Vanessa's face when Mia had taken a bite. That was what kept me standing here now. If this were just another one of her petty games, another way to humiliate me, she wouldn't have reacted that way. This was something more. My pulse quickened. I needed answers. The next morning, I placed the wrapped cake slice into a small plastic bag and tucked it carefully into my purse. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, but I knew someone who might. A short drive later, I pulled into the parking lot of a small medical testing facility. It wasn't the kind of place that typically handled this sort of request, but I had called ahead, explaining that I needed an analysis for potential food contamination due to a severe allergy risk. The receptionist hadn't asked many questions, just told me to bring the sample. A woman in a white coat met me at the counter, her expression neutral but professional. "You said you wanted this tested for allergens?" she asked, taking the bag from me. "Yes," I said carefully. "I have a severe allergy to..." I paused, choosing my words. "Certain ingredients. I just want to be sure this wasn't cross-contaminated." She nodded. "We can run a full panel. It'll take a couple of days." That was fine, I could wait. By the time I returned home, my mind was restless, bouncing between memories and half-formed suspicions. I made myself a cup of coffee, hoping it would help clear my head, but the moment I sat down at the kitchen table, my phone buzzed. It was from her. I stared at the screen. She never called me. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. I pressed accept. Hello? There was a pause, then hey. Her voice was different, lower, strained. It lacked the usual casual confidence she always carried. Hey, I said carefully. Another pause, then, so Mia felt a little sick last night. My grip on the phone tightened. What do you mean? Vanessa exhaled, the sound crackling through the line. She just had a stomachache. Probably nothing, but I was thinking. She hesitated, then let out a nervous laugh. Maybe it was the cake. I kept my voice steady. Maybe. You did say it was really rich. She laughed again, but it didn't sound right. Yeah, exactly. Silence stretched between us. I knew what she was doing. She was feeling me out, trying to see if I suspected anything. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Instead, I simply said, is she feeling better now? Yeah, totally fine this morning, she answered quickly, too quickly. I could almost see her in my mind, pacing in her kitchen, biting her lip, twisting a strand of hair between her fingers like she did whenever she was anxious. Good, I said. Kids have sensitive stomachs. Another pause, then, you didn't eat any, did you? The words were so quiet I barely caught them. I felt something cold settle in my chest. She wasn't asking out of concern. She was asking because she needed to know. Slowly, I set my coffee down. No, I said, keeping my voice light. Like I said, I wasn't that hungry. Vanessa let out a breath, something that sounded almost like relief. And in that moment, I knew. She had done something to that cake, and she had never expected me to catch it. I let the silence stretch, letting her sit in her own discomfort. Then finally, I said, well, I'm glad Mia's okay. Maybe it was just something she ate earlier. Yeah, Vanessa murmured. Probably. Another awkward beat, then, okay, well, I'll see you later. The call ended. I placed my phone on the table, staring at it. My hands were steady, my mind eerily calm. Vanessa had just confirmed my suspicions without even realizing it. She had expected me to eat the cake. She had wanted me to eat it. And now that I hadn't, she was panicking. I spent the rest of the day in a quiet haze, going through the motions but feeling detached from everything. I went to the grocery store, did some laundry, even answered a few emails. But through it all, my mind kept circling back to Vanessa. She had always been cruel in small, insidious ways. But this was something else. That night, as I lay in bed beside Daniel, staring at the ceiling, I thought about all the times I had let her get away with it, all the times I had smiled through her taunts, all the times I had let her make me feel small. Not anymore. Vanessa thought she had gotten away with something. She had no idea what was coming. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the rhythmic breathing of my husband beside me. The house was silent, but my mind wasn't. It echoed, looping over the details of the past 24 hours like a crime scene investigator piecing together a case. Vanessa had wanted me to eat that cake. That much was obvious now. But what wasn't obvious was why. I turned onto my side, staring into the darkness. The weight of suspicion pressed against my chest, heavy and unrelenting. The cake was now in the hands of the lab technicians, but their results would take time, and I wasn't a patient person. Not when it came to something like this. Vanessa was hiding something. I just had to figure out what. The next morning, I woke up with a plan. Daniel was already gone for work, leaving me alone in the quiet of our house. I made myself a cup of coffee, but my stomach twisted too much for me to drink it. I needed answers, and there was only one way to get them. I grabbed my keys and headed out the door. 15 minutes later, I pulled into Vanessa's driveway. Her house was picture perfect as always. White siding, navy blue shutters, flower beds well maintained, the kind of home that looked like it belonged in a magazine. But behind that pristine exterior was a woman who had spent years perfecting the art of making me feel small. Not today. I stepped out of my car, walking up the pathway with forced calmness. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and damp earth, the morning sun casting long shadows across the yard. I knocked. A few seconds later, the door swung open, and Vanessa stood there, still in her robe, a cup of coffee in her hand. Her eyebrows lifted in surprise, but it was the quick flicker of unease in her eyes that made my stomach tighten. Olivia, she said, forcing a smile. What are you doing here? I returned her smile, though mine felt far more controlled. Thought I'd stop by. You seemed a little off last night. Her grip tightened on her mug. Off? I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. Yeah, you looked really nervous when Mia ate the cake. And then you called me out of the blue this morning. Just seemed odd, that's all. She laughed, but it was thin, shaky. Oh, come on, you know how I am about food. I was just worried I'd overdone it on the richness. I didn't want Mia getting sick. I let the moment stretch, watching her closely. She was a skilled liar, I'd give her that. But I'd learned something over the years. Vanessa could fake a lot of things, but she couldn't fake guilt. And right now, guilt clung to her like perfume. I decided to push further. Did you use a new recipe? I asked, stepping past her into the house uninvited. She hesitated but closed the door behind me. Sort of. It was one I found online. Mind if I see it? She blinked, taken aback. See what? The recipe, I said, meeting her gaze. I might want to try making it myself. She let out another nervous laugh, but this time her hand twitched slightly at her side. Oh, I didn't save it. Really? You always save your recipes. She wet her lips, her fingers wrapping tighter around the coffee mug. I just forgot this time. I could feel them spilling, from her, one after another. And the more she spoke, the more I knew I was right to be here. I took a slow breath, keeping my voice even. I sent the cake for testing. Vanessa froze. Her knuckles turned white against the ceramic mug. You what? I watched her carefully, noting every micro-expression, the slight widening of her eyes, the tension in her jaw, the way she swallowed as if her throat had suddenly gone dry. I had a feeling something was off, I continued, so I took a piece to a lab. They should be getting back to me soon. For a moment she didn't say anything. The silence between us thickened, stretched, then she let out a sharp exhale, forcing a laugh that was so brittle it almost cracked in half. "That's insane," she said, shaking her head. "You actually think I would do something to your food?" I didn't answer because I knew she was expecting me to back down. She was waiting for me to laugh it off, to say, "Of course not, don't be silly." That's how it always went. But I wasn't playing that game anymore. Instead, I simply said, "I guess we'll find out soon enough." Her face drained of color, and for the first time since I had known Vanessa, she had nothing to say. I left her house feeling lighter but also more determined than ever. She had cracked. She had tried to maintain her usual confidence, but I had seen right through it. She was hiding something that had nearly made her collapse under the weight of my words. As I pulled into my driveway, my phone buzzed. A new email. My stomach flipped as I clicked it open. The lab results were in. My eyes scanned the text quickly, my breath hitching as I reached the final lines, traces of crushed medication found in sample. My hands trembled slightly as I gripped the phone tighter. She had done it. Vanessa had actually tried to lace my food. I had expected something, maybe an irritant, something mild, but this was deliberate. My pulse pounded against my temples. This wasn't just bullying. This wasn't just years of snide remarks and passive-aggressive digs. This was attempted harm. I stood frozen in my driveway staring at my phone, my fingers gripping it so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The words on the screen burned into my mind. Traces of crushed medication found in sample. I swallowed hard, my pulse thumping in my ears. My breath came shallow and the world around me seemed to blur. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. Vanessa had put something in that cake. The weight of it settled over me, heavy and suffocating. She had laced my food with something strong enough to be detected in a lab. My stomach twisted as a sickening realization settled over me. What if Mia had eaten more? What if I hadn't given her that slice? What if I had taken the bite, smiled politely and swallowed my own downfall? Anger flared in my chest, a slow-burning fire that roared to life. I had spent years brushing off Vanessa's cruelty, letting her taunts roll off my back like they meant nothing. But this was attempted harm, and she was going to face me for it. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just moved. Before I even realized it, I was in my car, the engine roaring to life. My hands clenched the wheel as I pulled out of my driveway, my foot pressing harder on the gas than necessary. My mind swirled with a storm of thoughts, each one darker than the last. I had given Vanessa a chance to explain. I had looked her in the eyes and given her a way out. She had lied, she had laughed it off, and all along she knew exactly what she had done. Now she was going to answer for it. When I pulled up to her house, I barely had time to turn off the ignition before I was out of the car, striding up the front path. My heartbeat slammed against my ribs, adrenaline fueling my steps. I didn't knock, I pounded. The sound echoed through the house, sharp and demanding. Seconds stretched, then the door swung open. Vanessa stood there dressed casually in leggings and a sweater, her hair pulled into a loose bun. For a moment, she looked startled, but as her eyes met mine, something else flickered in them. Recognition, and then fear. She knew. "Olivia," she said, her voice a forced, airy calm. "What are you—" I shoved my phone toward her face. "Read it." She blinked. "What?" I stepped closer, my voice low and firm. "Read it." Hesitant, her gaze dropped to the screen. The moment her eyes scanned the words, her entire body stiffened. A thick silence settled between us. Then she let out a weak, breathy laugh. "Oh, come on, this is ridiculous." I didn't move, I didn't blink. "Try again." Her fingers twitched at her side. "You're seriously going to believe some random test over—" "Don't." My voice was steady, but the anger in it cracked through like a whip. "Do not stand here and gaslight me, Vanessa." Her mouth snapped shut. I took another step forward, forcing her back into the entryway. "You put something in that cake. The lab found it. And now you're going to tell me exactly what you were thinking when you did it." She let out a dry chuckle, though it held no real humor. "You're acting like I tried to poison you. I didn't look away, did you?" Her face paled. "Of course not." I tilted my head. "Then what was in it?" Her mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. My chest tightened. "I could go to the police right now," I said, my voice unwavering. "This is evidence, Vanessa. I have proof, so you better start talking." Her breathing quickened, her eyes darting toward the living room as if searching for an escape. Then finally, her shoulders sagged. "I didn't mean for it to be serious," she muttered, avoiding my gaze. I scoffed. "Oh, right. Slipping something into my food is just a little prank now." She swallowed. "It was just supposed to make you sick, that's all." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. "That's all?" She flinched, my fingers curled into fists at my sides. "Why, Vanessa? Why the hell would you do this?" Her jaw clenched, and for a moment she said nothing. Then slowly she looked up, and I saw it. The raw resentment, the years of buried jealousy creeping into her expression. "Because you always win," she said quietly. My stomach twisted. "What?" Her lips pressed together before she spoke again, her voice sharper now. "You always come out looking perfect. Everyone loves you. My parents, my husband, our entire family." Her hands curled at her sides. "And no matter what I do, I'm always second best." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the absurdity of it all. "So you thought this was the solution?" I asked, disbelief laced in my tone. "You wanted to make me sick because of your own insecurities?" She exhaled, rubbing a hand over her face. "It wasn't supposed to be a big deal." I shook my head in disgust. "You're unbelievable." A silence fell between us, thick and suffocating, and then a soft voice spoke from the top of the stairs. Mom? Vanessa and I both turned. Mia stood there, rubbing her sleepy eyes, her hair tangled from sleep. She looked at me, then at her mother, confusion flickering across her little face. Vanessa's shoulders stiffened. Go back to bed, sweetie. Mia's brow furrowed. Why are you yelling? I inhaled sharply. A wave of sadness washed over me, because this was the real tragedy, wasn't it? The fact that Vanessa's selfishness, her bitterness, could have put her own daughter at risk. I turned back to her, my voice now quiet but firm. I don't care what your reasons were, Vanessa. I don't care about your jealousy, your insecurities, or whatever twisted logic you used to justify this. I shook my head. What I do care about is that you crossed a line you can't come back from. Her eyes darkened. So what, you're going to ruin my life now? I let out a slow breath, then stepped back. No, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady. You did that all on your own. I turned toward the door, leaving her standing there, her face a mixture of anger and something else, something dangerously close to regret. But it was too late for that now. I walked away from Vanessa's house with my heart pounding against my ribs, my hands shaking as I gripped the steering wheel. I should have felt relieved. Victorious even. I had confronted her. Forced her to admit what she had done. And yet, there was no satisfaction in it, because the truth had spilled out, raw and ugly, but it had done nothing to cleanse the air between us. If anything, it had made the weight of her actions even heavier. Vanessa had tried to make me sick. And for what? Because she felt like I always won? Because she thought my life was somehow perfect? I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back and shake her, make her understand that she had built this entire story in her head, that my life wasn't some flawless masterpiece she had to compete with. That I had struggles, pain, and moments of weakness just like everyone else. But it didn't matter, did it? Because she had already chosen to hate me. She had already let that bitterness fester inside her until it twisted into something dangerous. And now she was suffering the consequences of her own choices. I took a slow, shuddering breath, forcing myself to focus on the road. My hands tightened on the wheel as I made a decision. This wasn't over, not yet. By the time I got home, the house was quiet. Daniel was in the living room, flipping through channels mindlessly. He glanced up as I walked in, his brow furrowing at the sight of me. Hey, he said, setting the remote down, you okay? I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came. Was I okay? I wasn't sure anymore. I exhaled slowly, then walked over and sat down on the couch beside him. For a moment, I just stared at my hands, tracing the faint lines on my palms. I need to tell you something, I finally said, my voice quieter than I intended. His expression shifted instantly to concern. What is it? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to tell him, but because saying it out loud somehow made it more real. But it was real. So I told him everything. I watched as his face darkened, his jaw tightening with every word that left my mouth. By the time I finished, his fingers had curled into fists against his lap. She did what? His voice was sharp, anger simmering beneath the surface. I nodded, swallowing against the lump in my throat. I got the lab results back today. The cake had traces of crushed medication in it. He shot up from the couch, running a hand over his face as he paced the room. Are you serious, Vanessa? She actually tried to drug you? Yes. A heavy silence filled the room. Then suddenly he let out a harsh laugh, one with no humor. And she just admitted it? I nodded slowly, not at first. She tried to brush it off, act like I was overreacting, but when I pushed her, she cracked. Daniel turned to me, his eyes burning with barely restrained fury. She could have killed you, Olivia. The words hit me harder than I expected, because they were true. I had been so caught up in why she did it, so tangled in the emotions of it all, that I hadn't to let myself really process what could have happened if I had actually eaten that cake. Or worse, if Mia had eaten more of it. My stomach twisted painfully. Daniel exhaled sharply, raking a hand through his hair. We're going to the police. I looked up at him, startled. What? He turned, his eyes blazing. You heard me. This isn't just some petty grudge anymore, Olivia. She drugged food with the intent of making you sick. That's a crime. I swallowed hard. I know. Then why are we still sitting here? I hesitated. Because deep down, part of me didn't want to go to the police. Not because I wanted to protect Vanessa, far from it, but because I knew what it would do to Mia. Vanessa's daughter had no idea what kind of person her mother really was. She was still just a child, innocent to the reality of the woman raising her. If I pressed charges, Vanessa would be arrested. There would be an investigation, custody battles, family chaos, and Mia would be caught in the middle of it all. And for what? To punish a woman who had already destroyed herself? I took a shaky breath. Daniel, I want her to suffer, but I don't want Mia to suffer with her. His jaw clenched. And what happens when Vanessa does this to someone else? What happens when she doesn't get caught next time? I had no answer, because he was right. Vanessa wasn't just bitter, she was dangerous. And people like her didn't stop unless someone forced them to. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I picked up my phone and called the one person who would make Vanessa finally answer for what she had done, her husband. When Mark opened the door, his expression was unreadable. I need to talk to you, I said, my voice steady. He nodded once, stepping aside to let me in. I had never been particularly close to Mark. He was polite, kind even, but he had always seemed oblivious or maybe willfully ignorant to Vanessa's nature. But not today. Today, I was going to make sure he saw the truth. I sat down across from him in the living room, gripping the test results in my hands. I placed them on the coffee table between us, my gaze locking onto his. What is this? He asked cautiously. I took a breath. Proof. He frowned, reaching for the paper. As he read, his face paled, his fingers tightening around the page. This... His voice trailed off. He swallowed hard, looking up at me. Tell me this isn't real. I met his gaze. It's real, Mark. She did this. His hands trembled as he set the paper down. She could have hurt you. I nodded. She could have hurt Mia. His breath hitched, and in that moment I saw the exact second that reality crashed down on him. The way his entire body tensed, the way his shoulders slumped like the weight of his wife's sins had finally become too heavy to ignore. She's sick, he whispered, more to himself than to me. No, I corrected. She's cruel. A long silence stretched between us. Then finally he nodded. I'll handle it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I believed him, because he had more to lose than anyone. Mark sat there in silence, his fingers still clutching the test results as if they might dissolve in his grasp. His breathing was slow, measured, but his knuckles had turned white from how tightly he gripped the paper. I could see it happening. The moment the illusion shattered, the moment he realized that the woman he had built his life with was not who he thought she was. A long, heavy exhale escaped his lips. I don't even know who she is anymore. I leaned forward, my elbows resting on my knees. Maybe you never did. His eyes flickered toward me, something between grief and rage settling in them. I always knew she was difficult. She's been like that since we were young. Always had to be in control, always had to be the center of everything. But this is something else. I nodded slowly. It is. Silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken words. Mark finally set the test results down, rubbing a hand over his face. I have to protect Mia. That was the one thing we could agree on. Then do something, I said, my voice quieter now. Because if you don't, I will. His shoulders stiffened. He knew what that meant. I could go to the police. I should go to the police. But I was giving him a chance to deal with it first, to take responsibility before this turned into something worse. His jaw tightened. I'll take care of it. I studied him for a moment, searching for any sign of hesitation. There was none. He looked like a man who had just realized he'd been sleeping next to a stranger for years. I stood then. I'll leave it to you. He didn't stop me as I walked out, and I didn't look back. The fallout happened faster than I expected. Word spread through the family like wildfire. At first it started as whispers. Something was wrong between Mark and Vanessa. No one knew the details yet, only that Mark had packed a bag and taken Mia with him to stay at his parents' house. Then the truth came out. I don't know if Mark told them, or if Vanessa, in a desperate attempt to spin the situation, had confessed something herself. But within days everyone knew. And suddenly, Vanessa found herself standing in the ruins of the life she had so carefully constructed. The first time I saw her after everything fell apart, she looked different. Gone was the perfectly styled hair, the flawless makeup, the carefully curated image she always upheld. She looked smaller, as if the weight of her own actions had finally started to crush her. I ran into her at the grocery store. She was alone, hovering near the produce section, her hand gripping a basket like it was the only thing anchoring her to the ground. She saw me before I saw her. I only realized it when I felt the burning weight of her gaze on me. For a moment, I considered walking away. I had no interest in speaking to her, no desire to hear whatever excuse she had prepared. But she spoke first. Are you happy now? Her voice was hollow, lacking the usual sharpness it once carried. I turned slowly, meeting her eyes. Excuse me? You got what you wanted, she said, her lips curling into something that was neither a smirk nor a smile. You wanted to ruin me, and you did. I stared at her, unblinking. You ruined yourself, Vanessa. She laughed, but there was no humor in it, no. I made a mistake. One mistake, and now my life is over. I crossed my arms, tilting my head slightly. One mistake? My voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it. Vanessa, you spent years trying to tear me down. You thrived off of making me feel small. And when words weren't enough, you tried to poison me. Her face twisted. It wasn't poison. Then what was it? She had no answer. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. You did this to yourself. Every lie, every cruel word, every petty game. You built this, and now you have to live in it. Her nostrils flared, but there was no fight left in her. You have no idea what I've lost, she whispered. I arched a brow. You lost a husband who finally saw you for what you are. You lost a family who refuses to enable your behavior anymore, and if you're not careful, you're going to lose Mia too. That hit its mark. Her face crumpled for just a second before she caught herself. I don't need your pity, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Good, I replied, because you won't get it. And with that, I walked away. The last I heard, Vanessa had moved into a small apartment on the other side of town. She was no longer invited to family gatherings. No one called to check on her. She had built her entire identity on being the one in control, the one who could manipulate and twist people's perceptions to suit her needs. But the moment she lost that power, she had nothing left. Exile, I realized, wasn't just about being physically alone. It was about the unbearable weight of knowing that, for the first time, no one cared if you were. And Vanessa, she had never learned how to exist without an audience. Vanessa was gone. Not in the dramatic, grand way I once imagined. No police cars, no handcuffs, no courtroom standoff. There was no explosive final battle where she screamed apologies or begged for forgiveness. Instead, her absence was quieter, subtler, and yet it was heavier than anything I could have anticipated. The woman who had once dominated every family gathering, whose voice had been the loudest in every conversation, was now just missing. Her name wasn't spoken. No one asked about her. No one even brought up the situation, as if she had simply faded into the background of a life she had once tried so hard to control. And maybe that was the real punishment. Not public humiliation, not legal repercussions, but the slow, knowing realization that no one cared anymore. At first, I thought the weight would lift off my chest. That I would wake up one morning and finally feel free, as if shedding her presence from my life would be like taking off a heavy coat in the summer heat. But closure isn't something that happens all at once. It lingers, catches you in the quiet moments. Like when I went to a family gathering a few weeks later, and found myself instinctively bracing for some passive-aggressive comment that never came. Or when I stood in the kitchen, staring at the empty space on the counter, where the cursed slice of cake had once sat, my stomach twisting in memory. Or when Mia's laughter rang through the air as she played with the other kids, and I wondered if she fully understood what had happened. How could she? How could an innocent child ever comprehend that her own mother had been the architect of her own downfall? It haunted me more than I wanted to admit. One evening, I found myself parked outside a small apartment complex on the other side of town. I hadn't meant to come here. I had no reason to be here. And yet, here I was. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I had expected to see Vanessa through one of the windows, sitting in her new reality, forced to live with what she had done. Maybe I had imagined her alone, broken, regretting everything. But there was nothing. No grand realization, no catharsis. Just a row of dimly lit apartments, identical to each other, and the quiet understanding that I had wasted my time coming here. I wasn't here for closure. I already had it. Weeks turned into months. The world kept moving forward the way it always does. Mia stayed with Mark, who had finally started to shake off the remnants of the life he had built with Vanessa. He was quieter now, more serious, but there was something else too, determination, like he had been handed a second chance to do things right. Mia thrived. She was too young to understand the full weight of what had happened, but she sensed the shift. She was lighter, freer, no longer caught between the tension of a household that had been slowly cracking apart. I saw her one afternoon at the park, running across the playground with her cousins, her laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air. It was the happiest I had ever seen her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something settle inside me. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. Vanessa didn't try to reach out. Not to me, not to Mark, not even to Mia. At first I thought she might fight, that she would claw her way back into the family, demand to be heard, insist she was misunderstood. But she didn't, because even she knew there was no coming back from this. Her exile was complete, and she had no one to blame but herself. One day, I received a letter. No return address, no name, but I knew the moment I saw the familiar sharp handwriting. I knew. I sat on my front porch, the envelope resting in my lap like a loaded gun. Did I want to open it? Did I need to open it? A part of me wanted to tear it up, to throw it away without a second thought. But another part, curiosity maybe, won out. With careful fingers, I slid the paper out, unfolding it slowly, and I read, "Olivia, I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to believe me. But I want you to know that I've had time to think, really think, and I see it now. I see what I did, I see what I became, and I hate it. I hate what I did to you, I hate what I did to Mark, but most of all, I hate what I did to Mia. I know I don't deserve anything from you, not forgiveness, not understanding, not even a response. But I needed you to know that I see it now, and I'm sorry. I don't know where I go from here, but I hope one day Mia can forgive me. That's all I want now." Vanessa, I stared at the paper, my fingers tightening around it. The words sat there, inked into the page, weightless and heavy all at once. Did she mean it? Was this genuine regret, or just another manipulation? One last desperate attempt to claw her way back into our lives? I didn't know. And the truth was, I didn't care. Because it wasn't about me anymore. Vanessa had spent her entire life trying to control the narrative, to bend reality to fit her desires. But now she had to sit in the truth. She had to wake up every morning knowing she had built this exile with her own hands. And that was justice enough. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then, without another thought, I tossed it into the fireplace and watched as the flames swallowed it whole. Some things weren't meant to be held onto, some things were meant to burn. And as the last of the paper curled into embers, I let out a slow breath, not of relief, not of triumph, but of something far better, freedom.